share. Uh, I get the first one. Somebody put the first screen up so I remember what I have to do. Okay. Building relationships with Jesus and others. The core mission and vision for our church is sharing the gospel and providing a warm spring. Some of you have been with us a long time. We talked a lot about the warm spring, a place to renew and refresh. For the southern end of Whitfield County, and that began in 2007, May 13th, Mother's Day, 2007, and it continues to this day. And so that's how we started, and we've been moving ever since then. And for years, we actually physically moved as a church. We moved in June 2017 or 2007 to New Haven. We moved again in February of 2010 to the Carpet Alley, Connector 3, and then we moved again in 2011 to up here to the Plaza. And then in 2014, we purchased this property and later moved here in October of 15. It took quite a bit of work, quite a bit of money. And so we've had about 17 years of ministry, 16 and a half. We've bought church property. We have facilities now. In the last couple of years, since 2020, we've had 38 baptisms. I think sometime a year ago or 6 months ago, Beverly told me since inception we'd had over 200 baptisms. So we've reached a lot of people and shared the gospel with a lot of people, and we've seen a lot of people's lives change. In addition to those baptisms, we've encouraged a lot of people who were believers and are believers to strengthen their faith, and through Word of Life and through our preaching and teaching ministry, a lot of people, and I look across the room, and I get so excited because I see what God's done in so many of your lives. And so last year, since January 1 of 2023, we had about a 20% growth in worship. Now, we went through COVID and there was a lot of loss, a lot of things, where people stopped getting out and some, stopped attending and have not really ever started back. But from where we were in January to where we ended up, we had about 20% growth in worship. But we didn't grow the same in our connection groups. So that's kind of an emphasis this coming year. Community outreach, we've done things like school sponsorships and fed school community groups and teachers and done all kinds of things like that. We've done outreaches in the community. We've cleaned yards and raked leaves and done all those kinds of things. So there's been a lot of things over the last years. And so, as I said, we've seen spiritual growth and maturity and sharing the gospel. That's kind of where we've been. And next slide. Scott's, am I supposed to do this? Okay. He and I worked together on this, but I forgot what I'm supposed to do. So the needs of the community are great. There's still a lot of work to be done. And you'll see some of those bullet points there. Community outreach, Hope for the Hungry, which is a huge ministry for us. Church growth, youth ministry, education, spiritual growth, children's ministry, facilities. There's a lot, sharing the gospel, next step planning. We'll talk about that in a moment. Young adults, school outreach. Those are all areas that we need to give ourselves to in 2023. And it's so hard to do everything. But all those things are things that we try to support and try to do. And so Matthew 5:16 says, "Let your light shine before others so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven." And as I said this morning, God is interested in glorifying Himself through us. So that's kind of the continuing what we're wanting to do in 2024. Okay, next. Okay, so to achieve that vision, there's three areas really: prayer, 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 and more prayer. Jesus said, for without me you can do nothing. And so we're asking you this year to pray more, to pray for your church more, to pray for your church daily, and pray to see what God would have you to do to build the kingdom, God's kingdom, through this ministry. It takes congregational support, each one doing their part. I'll be talking next week about that word each one on Sunday morning. Did you know that phrase shows up over and over and over in the New Testament? Each one doing their part, their work, as each part of the body works. And so it needs, as a whole, we all have to do our part. And then we've got some facility issues, building issues. We're kind of like what the guy said in 2 Kings chapter 6, where the school of the prophets, and they told Elijah, said, the place where we're living in is too small for us. And then they said, let each one take a timber. So in order to have the facilities to reach more people and to do more ministry and not be bottlenecked, then we've got to think about space and management and use of facilities. And then Scott, he put my life verse in there, and a lot of you know it. Being confident of this very thing, that he which has begun a good work in you will perform it into the day of Jesus Christ. So, we've had our ups and downs. We've had a lot of years where it wasn't so easy, but we're believing that God wants to make an advance this year in our life. And so Scott's going to come and tell you a little bit about one ways that we can address facility issues.
Okay, so Scott's covered some already about how we got to this point. So it's been a 16-and-a-half-year journey to get here, and I think it's important to kind of take a minute and see where we've come from, because we have come a long way, and it's been a journey. But from the standpoint of looking back, I think it's equally important to look forward. And so that's what I want to talk about right now, is kind of the journey forward. And what do we have to look for going forward? And so a lot of you maybe were not here when we did the first vision campaign that we called it. And back in 2020, or 2010 actually, we had what we called the Believe campaign. And the sign that's on the wall in the back, we may walk by that and we don't really think much about it, but that's where that sign came from. That was part of our original vision that we had in the campaign in 2010. And really that campaign, if you think about it at the time, we didn't have a property, we didn't have a building. As Scott said, we kept moving from place to place, but we didn't have anything we could call our own. And so the entire premise behind the first Believe campaign was raising the money that we ultimately use to purchase this property. And so, that was a big fundraiser at the time. We raised the money, and thank God we had the funds, and we were able to purchase both the land and the buildings as well. And so we had I would call it an anchor verse that we used for that campaign. And that anchor verse was, where there is no vision, the people will perish. And so that's a lot of what we're anchoring on now as well, is that vision. And what does that vision look like for us going forward? And so, like I said, as by God's grace and the willingness of the congregation at that time. So the reason that we're here today is we had people who were willing to give, who were willing to work, who were willing to say, yes, I will stand up and help. And they did. And so we're standing on their shoulders today by the fact that we're in this building, and we're enjoying this building today. So as I say, now it's our turn. Okay, now it's our turn to step up and take the next step. And so for this year, we're setting 4 or 5 or 6 different goals. So yes, we have a financial goal, but we have some other goals as well that we want to do from a church perspective. And the first of those goals is financial, and that is paying off the balance of the loan. So we still owe money on this facility. The loan balance is $61,000. So that's a lot of money. And that sounds like a goal that's going to be very challenging. And when we think about it from our economy, it is pretty challenging. But when you think about it from God's economy, it's not a big deal. God's got $61,000. And so, we can pay that off. So that's goal one. Once we get this building paid off and we get this land paid off, then we can begin taking those next steps as a church. As Scott said, we're packed in here already. And so some of the things that we're going to be looking at is how do we take those next steps to get more room, more space, a nicer facility, a bigger facility. So that is in the future. Step one is getting the loan paid off for today. And so that's goal one, is getting that paid off. The second goal is we still want to be good stewards of this facility. This facility has served us well for a number of years, and we want to identify and prioritize how we can improve the facility and how we can improve the grounds as well. So the deacons and I just finished up a meeting just prior to this meeting where we're talking about sort of brainstorming, I would say at this point, is what are some of the things that we can do to improve the facility while we're taking those next steps to get to where we ultimately want to get to. So we'll have a list, and we'll bring that to you over the next few weeks of some of the things that we want to do with this facility. The third goal is the Bible recap. And so that is, that's reading the Bible through, chronologically through this year. And so we're using the Bible recap app. If you haven't started that yet, it's not too late. We're only 14 days in at this point. So you've got a little catching up in Genesis and Job to do. But from the perspective of reading through the Bible this year, that is a goal for all of us. Should be a goal anyway, but especially this year. We have the opportunity to really focus and get through the Bible in a year, and that's a nice milestone. And I think the more of us that can do that, the better off we'll be from a personal perspective and a church perspective as well. And then growing connections and other groups, as Scott mentioned already. Now, we have several outreaches. Hope for the Hungry, we've outreached to schools, to other organizations, but we want to grow that outreach. And we also want to grow connections. And so we have an opportunity in a few weeks to begin growing our connections and getting more people involved from a connection perspective. And then lastly, planning for Vision 2025 and beyond. So we don't want to stop at 24. Obviously, we want to keep looking ahead. So we want to put some plans together for what we want to do in 2025 and beyond. And this year will be a planning year for that. So those are our top goals for this year as a church and for individuals as well. So let me talk a little bit about the retiring the dead and what does that look like just from a kind of a timeline perspective. So we've got our vision kickoff meeting that we're having right now. And once that is concluded, we're going to be asking you to spend a couple of weeks prayerfully considering what you can do to help in retiring the goal. And then once we get beyond those 2 weeks, the week of the 28th, we're going to have the Sunday session, Sunday morning service. We'll have the presentation of those cards. And so we'll ask you at that point to complete filling out the card and turning that card back in. And then also on that week, and then the following week as well, you'll have the opportunity to give what we're calling our first fruits giving. So if you're committing to giving, then we'd ask you to, take that first step and make that first gift, either the week of the 28th or, paychecks and bills and everything else being the way they are. If the first week in February works out better, then first week in February is also our first fruit givings time frame that we're going to be asking to start that process. And then from there, we'll continue to give throughout the year. And we want to celebrate as we hit our goals and milestones. We've got a banner that we put up on the wall here, Vision 2024, and we'll keep that updated as people give, and we'll kind of keep a running total of where we are in achieving those goals. And then we want to celebrate. So once we get to a 50% of our goal. We want to have a celebration. Obviously, 100% of our goal, we want to have a celebration. And then we'll provide quarterly updates for you all. Here's where we are. Here's where we stand. Just so everybody understands, where we stand from a giving perspective and meeting our goal perspective. So, we can talk about giving and you think it, when you start thinking about it from I'd say, I call it a human perspective, we start thinking about, what can I afford to give? And I'd like to just read this because I think it's good. But as you pray about what to give during this special time, consider these two perspectives. A gift is based on reason. So, just what can I give? How much can I afford? It has no faith. Reason simply asks, what can I afford? But giving on revelation, and when we say revelation, this is revelation of God, that requires an act of faith. This means that I determine my gift by praying, and you can pray something like this: Lord, what do you want me to do? What do you want me to give by faith in you? So when you make this giving a matter of prayer, your decision becomes an act of worship. And when Christians pray and act in worship, the Lord's able to work in the midst. So what I would ask you to do is, number one, pray for Emmaus, pray for the church, but pray for our vision goals as well, and pray for all the vision goals, not just the money aspect. Pray for all the goals in 2024, and then ask God to reveal to you the sacrifice that He's willing that you need to make to help us achieve that goal. And then I was looking at 2 Corinthians 9, 6 and 7, and I think this is a verse that's very familiar to all of us. But that verse simply says, whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and whoever sows generously will also reap generously. And I put this in bold because I thought this was especially important. Each man should give what he's decided to give, not reluctantly, but not under compulsion. Neither one of those. But God loves a cheerful giver. And so, think about that as you're contemplating over the next couple of weeks, what you think you can give. Ask God what you should do, and lean on God for that understanding. Okay? So, what's the process? So we have pledge cards, and I think Matt gave those out. So every family should have gotten a pledge card at this point, and a commitment card for that you can fill out. And so the card has on it an amount. So there's a weekly, there's a monthly, there's a throughout the year. So if you want to give something weekly, that's fine. If you want to give something monthly, that's fine. Or if you say, I can't give really either one of those periods, but I can give a one-time gift, or I can give a little throughout the year. Whatever works for you, that's fine. But fill that out on the card, and then sign the card. And I put a chart up here. It's when you think about it from the perspective of giving, every little bit helps. So there is no set amount that anybody can give. But if you think about it, just $1 a week adds up. It's $52 in a year. Or if it's $10 adds up. It's $520. So if you think about it, you go to McDonald's, and a McDonald's meal is $10 these days. I mean, the prices have gone up. Or you go to your favorite coffee place, and you have a cup of coffee. I mean, the money adds up. So you think about that from the perspective of, well, what if I just gave up one of those meals? Or what if I just made a sacrifice here, maybe just 1 week? Over time, that's going to make a difference for us being able to achieve our goals. And you can see the list here. I mean, the money really adds up if you're talking about a weekly or monthly basis. But whatever you can do, put it on the card, and then sign the card. And then in signing the card, you're committing to God to be faithful in that giving. And then, like I said, we're going to ask you to return the commitment card during the service on the 28th, and then we'll have our first fruits giving on both the 28th, and the 4th. So I want to make sure that you're clear about this as well, that your giving is recorded. I mean, every week as we take the offering up, that offering is recorded, and then you get a statement at the end of the year of what you've given. So we'll record it, as is with all giving, but we're not going to total it. We're not going to compare it to your commitment. We're not going to do anything like that. The only thing that we would ask you to do is just honor the commitment that you've made, and that commitment is really strictly up to you and God. It is none of our business on what anybody's giving. So from that perspective, whatever you put, we're not going to monitor that. We're simply going to say you've made a commitment between you and God, and so let's honor that commitment. Okay, and for that, I'll turn it over to Scott.
Thanks, Scott. I wanted to say a couple of things about that card. Some of you may think, well, if you're not going to check it, and I'm not sure what I can do, why should I even fill out the card? Well, let me tell you why. First of all, just from a standpoint to help the church, it gives us kind of a metric to go by on planning. You know, if we let's just say when you turn in the cards, we'll total all the estimated gifts. Well, we're looking at a debt of $61,000, and I would love it if all those cards totaled up to $61,000. Maybe they'll total up to more, but maybe they'll total up to less. You see, this campaign is really not about figuring out what everybody can do, but it's really about a guide for prayer. Because God can do immeasurably above all that we ask or think. Amen? God can do more than we can imagine. I preached this morning about, it wasn't the 32,000 that won the battle, and it wasn't the 10,000. It was the 300. And so they were far outnumbered. But God makes up the difference when we act in faith. And so when you put that number down, seeking God, seeking to do what the best you can according to God's will, and with God working with you, it's a measure of your faith. It's a statement of your faith. And I don't know about you, but a lot of times when I begin to ask God about things like that, a number will pop into my mind. Whether I'm asking Him about how much I can give somebody a gift, or how much I can give to a Lottie Moon mission offering, or how much I can give. And it may not, I try not to think about what I can afford to do, but a number will come. And if I'll think about that and pray about that, God will confirm, hey, I want you to do this. And then it becomes a measure of my faith. I'm asking God then to help me do what He's asked me to do, just like with Gideon this morning. And so I wanted to say that it is important that you fill out the card. And like he said, we're not keeping track in terms of where we're going to say, hey, you missed your commitment this week or this month or anything like that. None of that's going to take place. It just gives us a total number that we can work from. Also, in relation to that, when later on, when we have to do some financing on a future building, those types of things, the banks want to know. They want to know how many people, how much money do you think is your church willing to do? And so they want to know those things. We're not hemmed into them, but it just gives them some scale for commitment. So that's all that is. So planning for the future. We want to build in the future, but we've got to prove ourselves faithful to value what God's already given us. And that doesn't just mean paying off the debt. That means, Scott mentioned, making building improvements and getting, taking care of what God's given us and improving the appearance, improving a lot of things. There's a lot of things we'd like to do that the deacons are talking about, but, if the debt is primary, how much can we do in addition to that? So if you have an idea of something you think really needs to be done to help the appearance or to help us be more effective, let your deacon know. And so we're planning this next year. We're going to spend a lot of time planning for the future years. And so that's part of what's going on this year as well. We want to accommodate more sanctuary space. There's Sundays when we are, full and families can't sit together. That takes place. And to be honest, a lack of faith about adding space prohibits future growth. That's true in Sunday school or connections or any classroom, any building size. And so we need to be able to plan effectively and be faithful in doing what God asked us to. So we need sanctuary space. We need classroom space. That's why that sanctuary class that I mentioned earlier is going to start here, and we hope it to move it to a room. We've only got one possible room left, and right now it's full of storage. So, and it needs renovating. So storage is critical before we can even begin the next phase of the vision. Planning will be important this next year to help determine the type of facility, type of design, size, function, cost, funding, repurposing what we've got. Once we move out of this space, what are we going to do with it? What's the best way to make use of it? So all those things are going to be taking place this year, continuing to improve and enhance the existing facility as a Vision 2024 goal. Will ensure we are good stewards of what God has provided for us to achieve the goals that He's given us while we look to the future for growth and expansion. Okay, next slide. And I'll be here, Scott's here. Any questions about what we're talking about here? We're talking about spiritual goals. We're talking about numerical goals if we talk about reaching people. And we're talking about financial goals. That's our vision for this year. Questions? Don't be bashful. This is our time. This is family time. Thank you, Tyson. Yes. We're talking about something outside the tithe. If there are some of you, I have no way of knowing and don't ever want to know who gives what to the church. I wouldn't know what any individual gives to this. I wouldn't know what any individual gives on an ongoing basis. But this is outside your regular giving. Right now, I can tell you that some of us are still giving based on that first campaign 13 years ago. There are still people here that are giving based on that. There are a lot of you who have joined us since then, and you may or may not have started giving. I have no idea. But I can tell you that on an average month, what's given to what we call the vision, which is above and beyond, outside the tithe, it will run anywhere from about $700 a month to $1,000 a month. Is that about right? I know that's a broad range. It varies a lot. Yeah. So there are people who are giving now. So we're not asking you to do something that others have not done. If you are currently doing something, we're not asking you to change that, discontinue that, increase that. We're just asking you to pray and see if God wants you to do something different. But it is outside the general operating budget of the church. So, no, as long as you put it in the memo line, This is for this. This is for this. And yes, and you can do that through the tithe layout too. It's a little bit. You have to make sure you fill out the box. There's a comment box. You got to make sure you fill that out and check the appropriate boxes, so that the accounting can pick that up. Deborah. What is the beginning total? I don't know that I remember exactly. Was it about 160,000? Yeah, and we had on hand, if my memory is correct, at the time we bought this property, we had about $25,000 or $30,000 maybe on hand. I'm not, don't hold me to that, but my memory is somewhere in that area, and I could be way off, but I think that's what we had. And so then we had to pay for getting these buildings moved from Atlanta. That was over $40,000. And then we had spent a lot of money on this property, grading and developing and, various fees. And then once we got the buildings here, some of you remember, we had to go in and do a lot of repairs and, improvements and paint and build walls, tear down walls, all kinds of stuff. So I think we had a total of about 150 to 160,000 financed. So it's down to about 60,000. If we had the money now to pay it off, it would be 40. Yeah, around 45 or 46,000. Currently, we just made, Rick, in last month or at first of this month, you made a $15,000 payment over and above our regular payments on the building. And that happens usually about once a year, and sometimes it's not that much. It just depends on how much we've got. All that money goes into a savings fund, what we call a Believe Fund or Vision Fund. And so after we did that, there's about 7,000 roughly left in that. And then we have a general operating fund, and that's what we generally operate on unless we just have a major expense that we have to borrow from that savings account. So that's kind of how the money works. So the payroll, all the building expenses, Rick just told us while ago in the deacons meeting, our utilities for last month was $1,700 here for heat cost. The month before, $450. So when you're leaving the building, check the heat, okay? Don't leave it up there. Bring it down here. Thermostats.
Get the Wi-Fi thermostat, set somebody up. You can set timers and controls, and it'll tell you. We did that in Carolyn and knocked our power bill down tremendously. My dad was monitoring it and off hours.
Put that in the list.
Reached a certain level in the car, he could do it and turn on the thing back off.
Yeah. This building heats up pretty fast, but during these really cold months, we try to leave some heat on in here. But yeah, it's going to be so. Anyway, any other questions? Thank you, Tyson, for that one. Thank you, Deborah. Any other questions about what we're hoping to do, praying to do, and whatever it comes up to be that you turn in as a commitment prayerfully with God as your helper? That's the way we tried to word the card. It says, to the best of my ability, with the Lord's help, I'm committing to give to the Vision 2024 goal by giving, and then you fill in. So it's kind of simple, and things happen. People lose their job. People's hours are changed. All that stuff happens. We're not holding your feet to the fire. But we also want you to pray so that you can give based on the Lord's revelation to you, what He's saying to you. So it takes faith. And if it should come up not meeting the goal to pay off the building, then that gives us something to pray about. Because God can do way more than we can do when we make it a matter of prayer. Okay? Any other questions? Gosh, y'all are too easy. So everybody got the timeline? You're praying about it for 2 weeks. On Sunday morning, the 28th, we'll turn the pledge card in. Before you leave that day, you'll know what's been committed. I called it a pledge card. I don't like that word, but what's been committed, you'll know. We'll let you know. We'll announce it at the end of the service. When you get ready to start giving, if you're giving cash, certainly use this envelope. We'll have plenty of these around. And it looks just like that banner. Vision 2024. You're giving to pay off the debt and to help us with managing anything related to this building. Our monthly payment, by the way, just so you know, things affect the church just like they affect your house. We got a notice from the bank the other day. Our interest rate went from 6% to 9.25%. Right, Rick? I think he's looking, but I believe it went. I didn't really understand it because the interest rate went up and our payment went down. But yeah, so those are things that we have to deal with. So the sooner we pay this building off, yeah, it was 6. So the sooner we pay this building off, the less interest we pay. And pardon me? I thought I heard somebody say something. So what we'd like to do is every month make an interest payment based on your giving. We could wait and hold it, but we're going to incur more interest. The more payments we make, the better off we are. So it starts with connecting. As each part does its work, Ephesians tells us, the body is strengthened. How would your body do if one part of your body didn't work? I can tell you about that. If one part's not working, then it hinders the overall operation of your body. And so your part, as a member, as someone who loves the Lord and loves this church, it's important. And I try not to make money a big deal. I try not to preach a whole lot about money. I do from time to time. But I never want it to be about money. I want it to be about you and the Lord's work in your life. And so I'm not saying other churches that do talk a lot about money or have a campaign about money. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying that's how I feel. Okay? I am going to talk about money soon. But as I said this morning, the message this morning and the next 2 messages all kind of come together around this whole thing of our vision for 2024. So we'll be looking at some of those things. Robert's got plenty of money. He could pay this building off if he wanted to. Teach you to open your mouth. Do what? What was that? Yeah, that's right. You look like a young Nick Saban. All right. Any other questions? Okay. Let's discontinue the YouTube. If you can shut that down, I do have one more